Maybe in your reading of the Amidah, you made it to page 56. If you didn't, would you mind opening your books to that page for just a second? So the prayer on that page is called Ritzeh. And then if you look at the English, find favor Adonai. So one of the things that is customarily done in the Amidah is the Jewish people over the centuries have turned to God and said, remember us, let us find favor with you. Because, and I think it's important for us to hear this given our time in history, because this may be news to some of you, but times were not always good for the Jewish people. So this kind of a prayer was particularly important. And if you look at the small font there in the middle of the page, it's unique to Passover. And that particular prayer, Eloheinu v'Elahei Avotenu v'Imotenu Ya'aleh v'Yavo, rise up and be with us. Remember us, Yichorneinu, remember us and hear us, take note of us. And it's a way that we perhaps can find common cause and common place with our ancestors throughout history who sometimes found themselves in a place of utter despair, and they hoped that somehow through the vehicle of the prayers they would find blessing, and they would find hope, and they would find renewal. And so our times are certainly not as dark as times have been in the past, but nonetheless we know that our people have turned to their faith and to each other as a way of finding strength. So it's with that spirit that I'm going to share the words that I'm about to share with you, because we've had a rough 18 months or so. And again, you don't need me to tell you that either. Between the Hamas attacks, the hostages, and the Gaza war, and what I want to really talk about tonight, which is the resurgence of antisemitism in our midst. So if you're having trouble sleeping at night, you're not alone. And just this week, there was an arson attack on the house of Pennsylvania's Governor Josh Shapiro. And the perpetrator, in his insanity, held Shapiro responsible for Israel's behavior. Now, that, folks, is the very definition of anti-Semitism. So to his credit, Shapiro, as he does so amazingly well, responded loudly and proudly and doubled down on his Jewish identity publicly. But things are happening closer to home as well. So someone sent me an Instagram screenshot berating the Instagram screenshot was berating UTLA, the Union for the Teachers of Los Angeles, for their anti-Semitic and anti-Israel positions. So whenever anything comes to me on social media, I double-check it, triple-check it sometimes. So I wrote to my friend Nick Melvin, who was an LAUSD board member, and I asked him, what's going on? Not only did he confirm the post, but he sent me the actual letter that was written by the UTLA leadership team to the board, signed by the union head, Cicely Maillard Cruz. And the letter, which I have on my computer, requests that LAUSD sever its relationship with ADL and stop using ADL's famous and well-tested and well-received anti-hate curriculum. Why? Because this letter claims that the curriculum, this is quoting, equates criticism of Israel's occupation of Palestine and genocide in Gaza with anti-Semitism and seeks to indoctrinate our students into support for a nation state that Amnesty International has concluded commits crimes against humanity. I should add, by the way, I had to edit that sentence because considering it was written by teachers, it was pretty grammatically terrible. So not only was it filled with unsubstantiated assertions, but in conflating ADL's efforts to overcome anti-Semitism in the United States with the policies of a distinct, separate, sovereign Jewish nation, well, folks, when it looks like anti-Semitism and smells like anti-Semitism, guess what it is? So note, by the way, we're in touch with Nick Melvin. We're going to arrange, working with his scheduler, to arrange a time for him to talk about what we might be able to do as a community to respond to this, because it needs a response. Similar misassumptions, I should say, underlie the protests on university campuses for the past 18 months, holding all Jews responsible for the behavior of a sovereign nation, denying that that nation has a right to exist, and accusing that nation of genocide. It's a level of intellectual shortcutting and sloganeering that rises, or maybe I should say sinks, to the level of anti-Semitism as well. And we also, during these times, can't take our eyes off the classic international Jew trope that still continues to be circulated. It's reflected in the condemnation of the 94-year-old George Soros. He's a Hungarian-American citizen, philanthropist, and hedge fund manager. He's made a lot of money. He's accused of maliciously masterminding and manipulating the world finance and supporting protests in various nations, including this one. And yet, and maybe there's an irony in this that we can't miss, Elon Musk, no accusations against him from those same voices. Peter Thiel, David Sachs, Timothy Mellon, all these folks who are giving a lot of money to causes in a particular area of this world, this one, are not being accused of manipulating world finance and this nation. So, and not to alarm you even more, but though they've been quiescent for the past year, America's right-wing militias and hate groups are armed to the teeth. They are still violent, and they're immersed in conspiracy theories that could resurface at any time. So forgive me for this painful refresher, but it's important that we recognize the dangers that are lurking from so many corners as we contemplate how we are to respond. Prayer is wonderful. Prayer just gives us strength to act in the world. So how do we respond? Do we respond with lawsuits? Is it appropriate to withhold funding from universities, federal funding from universities? Should we apply donor pressure to those same universities? Are protests adequate? Is legal action against white nationalists that undermines their sources of finance effective? Yes, 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 and yes, it seems like. Well, we can argue, certainly, that pressure on the universities has produced some desired results. How about the threats of deportation against some of those agitators? Can we and should we truly breathe a sigh of relief with the detention and possible expulsion of Muhammad Khalil? He's the Columbia University protester organizer. Or should we be alarmed? Because the shadow of extrajudicial renditions reminds us of the actions anti-Semitic regimes throughout history have used against our people. USSR, Nazi Germany, Argentina, Iran, they've all used extrajudicial renditions. So here's my assertion tonight. As the arrows fly against us from so many directions, the responses required are complex, they're often nuanced, and they depend on vital allies. What we can't afford to do is to sow divisions in our own community. And yet, that is exactly what is happening. Consider the case of Emily Kamen. She was a longtime member of a Facebook group in Atlanta called Jewish Moms of Atlanta. She was recently kicked off the group. Kamen is the wife of a conservative rabbi. She's involved in her own synagogue. She's an established presence in the Atlanta Jewish community. What was her sin? Well, Kamen is the regional director of engagement for J Street. And the reason, stated not to her, but by others in the group, was anyone affiliated with organizations that undermine Israel's security and that of the Jewish people, Jewish Voice for Peace, J Street, etc., in the same brackets, should exit the group immediately. Essentially, Kamen was declared anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic. In an article she wrote for the Jewish Forward this week, it's a centuries-old paper, it started in Yiddish, now you can get it in Yiddish and English, Kamen states that she's known of many others pushed out of Jewish spaces for calling for such things as a ceasefire so the hostages could be brought home, or for the delivery of aid to Palestinian non-combatants, or for expressing grief over the death of Palestinian innocents, or for expressing disagreement with Israel's current government. And this despite the fact that all those folks who are pushed out of those spaces are avowed believers in the right of Israel to exist. They are absolutely Zionists. So are these people anti-Semites or are they allies? Well, apparently, in our own Jewish community, it depends who you ask. Just this week, 36 members of the Board of Deputies of British Jews published a public letter harshly criticizing Israel's offensive in Gaza. It was posted in the London Financial Times, one of the UK's most venerated and long-established and right-leaning papers. Their words: "We write as representatives of the British Jewish community out of love for Israel and deep concern for its future." The letter goes on. "The inclination to avert our eyes is strong, as what is happening is unbearable. But our Jewish values compel us to stand up and to speak out." Are these people anti-Semites, these Jews, self-hating Jews, or are they allies? Apparently, in the minds of some, it depends who you ask. Also from this week's news, several Jewish university presidents have refused to acquiesce, as you know, to financial threats from the United States government and refused to then, under their rules, agree to impose policies and procedures from the government with regard to anti-Semitism on their campuses. Harvard's president, Alan Garber, in case you can't tell by the name, Jewish, has said, although some of the demands outlined by the government are aimed at combating anti-Semitism, the majority represent direct governmental regulation of the intellectual conditions at Harvard. To be clear, Garber is, according to Rabbi David Wolpe, smart, capable, honestly determined to make Harvard better, and facing enormous challenges given the entrenched culture. And, according to Rabbi Hershey Zarki, the founder of Harvard Chabad, Garber is a man of great integrity and high moral character. He's a proud and committed Jew. He puts on tefillin daily, and he teaches Torah at Chabad, good Torah, Zarki said. Garber himself has been a victim of anti-Semitism. Student protesters at Harvard depicted him as a devil. That's another anti-Semitic trope. And he was booed at one of the commencement ceremonies last year for refusing to let some of those offenders graduate with the rest of their class. And also, these notable and Jewish university presidents have joined Garber in their refusal to acquiesce to government demands. Christopher Eisgruber, president of Princeton University, Jewish, someone who discovered his Jewish heritage later in life, but now proudly affirms his identity, has refused government manipulation. MIT's Sally Kornbluth and Wesleyan's Michael Roth, all Jewish, have also done that. So are they anti-Semites, are they self-haters, or are they allies? Well, apparently it depends on who you ask. My brother-in-law, who's in Israel right now, an Israeli, consumes the news in Hebrew 24/7. He shared with me many of the opinion pieces that are being circulated in some of Israel's newspapers, calling these university presidents sellouts to the anti-Semites and anti-Israel protesters on their university campuses. And I'm sure that there are many in the United States who feel the same way. So the question remains, are they anti-Semites or are they allies? Well, apparently it depends on who you ask. Aaron Dorfman is the executive director of A More Perfect Union. That's a Jewish partnership for democracy. And he wrote about these grants the following: "The framing of these actions in terms of protecting Jews from anti-Semitism is disingenuous at best and dangerously manipulative at worst." So is Dorfman a self-hating Jew, an anti-Semite, or an ally? Depends who you ask. Before I came up here, I was looking through some last-minute emails, and I saw an email from Unacceptable. It's a group of Israeli expats who live mostly in North Bay area, who are mobilizing a letter in opposition to Ben Gvir's visit. Ben Gvir is a minister who is avowedly racist. Are the members of Unacceptable anti-Semites, or are they allies in the fight against anti-Semitism and for support of Israel? My point is if we're to stand against the complex anti-Semitic forces arrayed against us, the Jewish community can't draw narrow lines that disqualify the voices that don't closely adhere to particular beliefs that we think are mainstream. But that's what's happening. Some may not agree with the positions held in the examples I've shared. I am not making the case for you to agree. I'm not telling you have to agree with these positions. But I do believe that their positions are worthy of, at the very least, meaningful consideration. These are not disconnected, uncaring, self-hating Jews by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm firmly convinced that especially during these times, we as a community cannot afford such divisiveness. So I've found some examples of what I think are broadly cooperative unity, and I think it's important that we recognize them. Every Thursday at 11 a.m., I join a national Zoom call with the Federations of North America, Jewish federations. On that call are rabbis, federation executives, Hillel directors, university administrators, and often more than 100 people. During that call, for 30 minutes, they take a deep dive into some manifestation of antisemitism and the range of efforts to push back against the upswell. And what's impressive is the open, diverse, civil, nuanced conversation that characterizes the call. And I know, because I know some of the people on the call, that there are a wide diversity of perspectives on that call. I've shared with you, through email, many of the updates and calls for action. Next month, more than 15 members of this community, the WISE community, and hundreds of Jews across California will attend the Jewish Public Affairs Committee Capital Summit. We'll be focused on one piece of legislation this year. It's pushing back, and it's at the request of the California Legislative Jewish Caucus. The goal is to pass legislation that's going to remove the overt anti-Semitism in the statewide ethnic studies curriculum. Now I know, because I know a lot of the folks that are going, there's a wide diversity of perspectives that are held by JPAC participants. So what do I want you to take home? We have to reconsider what Jewish unity has to look like in the face of these current times and problems. We have to ask ourselves, should we sanitize our Jewish community and our Jewish communal organizations and associations of Zionists and Jews with whom we disagree? Will that ultimately help us? Must the Jewish response be monolithic and single-messaged? Or are we stronger when we leverage that rich diversity, the diversity that gives us an ability to respond and address anti-Semitism across the political spectrum from a lot of different angles against a wide range of offenders? You know where I stand. I believe the latter. Rather than shut people out, we have to make room for dissent, for debate, and for discussion. That will ensure that our work is robust, complex, and most importantly, I know you join me in this, most importantly, effective. I believe our diversity is our strength. I'm not alone, I'm sure. Ultimately, what matters most is that we're all united in our shared and resolute purpose, which I do believe all of us are, and that's in securing the Jewish future for ourselves and for the generations to come. And so may it be.